Welcome into the Mainly Hoops National Championship game preview. It's crazy we've made it this far to this game now, last game of the year. Um, Pretty unfortunate, honestly. Like, as good as the game's, as good as the tournament's been, sucks that we're at the end.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely does. I don't know what I'm going to do with my time for the next 5 or 6 months, but probably just sitting around waiting for the next season. But it's been definitely an exciting season. We had, a couple of exciting games last night as well, which is like obviously what we hope for.
Mhm.
You know, the top four teams going at it, and we got some really good games. Arguably the two best games of the entire tournament. So it's kind of everything I wish for. It wasn't obviously the results I was expecting, especially for that second game with Houston, but obviously super exciting, and I'm really excited to watch this championship game tomorrow night.
Yeah, definitely. So to recap last night, right? Florida, they were down 9 in the second half, went 9-0 to come back and tie it. Walter Clayton was phenomenal again, 34 points. They couldn't keep him in front. When they could, he just drained a three over them. I was a little bit worried throughout the game. Florida was turning the ball over quite a bit again, had 16 turnovers. It kind of felt like that was going to be their demise, but they managed to find a way again. And then the Houston Duke game, Duke was up 59-45 with under 10 minutes left, I think. And Duke only made one field goal over the last 10:30, and Houston came back and showed their number one ranked defense in the country. Made enough plays. LJ Cryer was fantastic and wound up getting the win. So two pretty impressive wins, two great games, as you said.
Yeah, and for Houston, that's got to be the most impressive stretch of defense for anybody over the course of the season. Honestly, you hold down the number one rated Ken Palm and Torvik offense to one field goal over the final 10:30, and a lot of it. The pressure in the final minute of the game, like I don't think anybody can really break that late game pressure. They've shown every single time they've been down, and it's not very often. Like I said, like before we came on here, I said this game it reminded me of the game at Fog Allen when Houston was down 6 with 20 seconds left and made that big turnover and hit a big shot. Well, Sharp hit that big shot, and this one it was Tugler on that putback, and then obviously I don't know what people think about the foul on Flag there. It was like, I don't know. Like initially, I thought like Flag did go over the back, and you watch the replay, and it was like maybe it was a little bit of a phantom foul. But I don't really know if he should have put himself in that situation to even try to reach in for that ball. You kind of just got to get back and play defense at that point. You still have a lead, but overall, Houston, they always find ways to win in these scenarios, and they're just a fantastic team. And like that pressure is going to be extremely hard to break in this game as well if Florida happens to be up 4 or 5 in the last minute or two.
Yeah, for sure. So moving to tomorrow night's game, Vegas has this spread at Florida -1. Torvik projections, actually, as we've talked about, they love Houston. They have Houston -3.6 in this game. So they're obviously much higher on Houston analytically than Vegas is. But I think, as I was talking about a minute ago with Florida, their turnovers have been a problem in this tournament. They've turned it over 14 times a game, 16 last night against Auburn. And now they're playing a Houston defense that, had success turning Duke over, who takes care of the ball. And they're the 23rd ranked turnover rate defense in the country. So I think Houston can have some success in that area. I think Florida's been super careless with the ball. I think one thing they're also going to look to do is probably pressure those bigs when like Condon, Rubin, Micah, when they have the ball in that like key area and they're going like wing to wing on handoffs. I think they're going to pressure them because they're going to watch and see that Auburn had some success there. That's kind of where Auburn was able to force a few turnovers, like blowing up handoffs. and just pressuring those bigs who aren't really accustomed to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably the key to this game on the defensive end for Houston is kind of blowing up those primary actions of like Clayton and pick and roll, and in the handoff game, they're gonna hard hedge, blitz, whatever you want to call it. I know Sampson doesn't love to call it a blitz, but forcing the ball out of Clayton's hands and like guys like Condon, Tommy Haug, hand locked in, and like Chinyelu in like a short roll situation. It's like those aren't guys that I trust to make like high level decisions against elite defenses. And I think they're like Houston's defense is pretty well set up to kind of hold Clayton down to an extent. I mean, and then when they give up the ball to the roll man, Florida is in the 28th percentile in points per possession in pick and roll man possessions. So I do think they're going to be able to force Florida into making some rather poor decisions, trying to get the ball to weak side shooters. I think it's going to be tough for this Florida offense to be able to run through Clayton consistently, who's going to be on ball a ton and playing in those primary actions. It's going to be up to guys like Elijah Martin and Will Richard to kind of step up in spot up situations and catch and shoot situations to have success here.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, as good as Clayton's been, and he's still going to get his in this game, right? I mean, he's been fantastic. He's going to make shots. But I think Houston's going to have more success than any other team they've played. Obviously, the number one ranked defense. Then I think they're going to be able to have some success in keeping him in front a little bit. Like last night, he was, as the game was kind of going, like wearing down, he was just getting by his defender, getting to the rim. I don't know if it's going to be that easy against this Houston defense, especially with their back line. They do a great job just even despite being a little bit undersized, they do a great job of just walling up and forcing tough twos at the rim. So I think that's going to be the key, right? And it's going to require Will Richard to play better. Like Martin was good yesterday. Will Richard was not. I mean, he was like 1 for 7, I think. Didn't really give them much shot making. I mean, he did some good things on the defensive end, but they're going to need more from him offensively here if they want to come out on top.
Yeah, and it's like Florida's not like really an elite catch and shoot offense by any means. They're in the 62nd percentile in points per shot in catch and shoot situations. And it's you kind of need that trait to really be able to not break this defense, but at least, have a good amount of success against the Houston defense. And Duke did it for a while. Like they ended up generating some open looks, and obviously Flag was great in isolation situations. And I mean, he looked great for 30 minutes of the game, just like the rest of the team. But yeah, I mean, Florida's going to have to be great on the offensive glass as they always are. And when Houston's getting forced in a rotation, obviously it's a little bit harder to get on the defensive glass when you don't have a body on someone all the time. And that shows. And Houston, they're 116th nationally in defensive rebound rate. Florida 5th on the offensive glass. So that's obviously going to be their ticket to offense. But one other thing I like for the way Houston matches up defensively is their ability to keep Florida out of transition. I mean, Florida, they're not transition reliant, but they get out in transition at pretty much any chance they can get. They're in the 85th percentile in transition frequency and in the 98th percentile in points per possession. Like if they're getting stops and getting out and running, and they're rather unstoppable on the offensive end. But Houston is extremely well set up if they can find paths to score consistently, which is kind of my concern in this game. But Houston in the 4th percentile in transition opportunity allowed, and in the 79th percentile in points per possession. So if they can keep this game in the half court, I think they have just as good a chance as any. Like, it kind of reminds me of when Florida went on the road and played Tennessee and just kind of just couldn't generate anything in the half court. This setup for Houston, like, it kind of reminds me of that game a little bit. And even in that first game against Tennessee, like, that's the defense that I would, I guess, compare to Houston here. Like, Florida won that game by 30, but their half court offense actually wasn't all that great. They only scored 73 points, and like points per possession basis, it wasn't great. if I remember correctly. So they haven't really, like, Florida's struggled on the offensive end when they're forced to play in a half court game, like against Texas Tech for the first 35 minutes of the game. The offense wasn't all that great, and they happened to, Walter Clayton kind of brought them back as he has throughout this entire tournament. But I don't think he's as well set up to get those open looks off the dribble that he's gotten against a lot of these teams. Every defense that they've played has been a more passive defense. They play more drop coverage than Houston. Obviously, Houston doesn't really play any drop. They're either going to switch or they're going to high hedge. So, yeah, I think if Florida gets down in this game, it's going to be a little bit more difficult for Walter Clayton to bring them back in this game and show off his heroics again. So it's just, the problem with me is just how is Houston going to generate offense? It's mostly it's going to be in the pick and roll game, but I don't think you can rely on, Uzan and Cryer all night in the pick and roll game and in the mid range. They're going to have to find other ways to score. I know Houston can do it on the offensive glass as well. I mean, they're 10th nationally in offensive rebound rate. In Florida, they are a little susceptible there. They're 135th nationally on the defensive glass. But Houston's going to have to find ways to score on the interior, and I think the way they're going to do that is through the mid range and through that pick and roll game. It's just it's hard for me to trust a mid range shot creation game for an entirety of 40 minutes. So yeah, it's hard. It feels like a coin flip game to me, but I think Houston's defense sets up so well in this game, and they can play their style of game, and they can make Florida feel a little bit uncomfortable. So I'm going to side with Houston for now. I mean, my opinion might switch pregame, but at the moment, I would like Houston to win.
Yeah. Going back to your point about Florida on the offensive glass, obviously, like, that's an area of advantage here. Fifth in the country offensive rebound rate. But, the one thing I noticed, even like in the game last night with Duke, like, it seems like Houston they're just selling out, playing as hard as possible. Like, all these guards last night were just rebounding down. Like, everyone was just trying to get a hand on the ball. So I think, like, obviously Florida's going to have their success on the offensive glass. But I think Houston can maybe limit that a little bit just with how hard they're playing. I mean, these guys last night, like, were playing like their life depended on it on the glass. It seemed like obviously Duke got their fair share of offensive rebounds still, but that's going to happen against, a Duke team that's bigger than them. But then on the other end, right, I mean, at this point, it really seems like Houston on the offensive glass, like, it doesn't matter who they're playing. Last night, 15 offensive rebounds against Duke, who was top, they're 43rd, I think, in the country in defensive rebound rate. Now they're playing a Florida defense that is outside the top 130. It just doesn't matter. I mean, these guys just have a nose for the ball on the offensive glass. They get a hand on everything. Super, super impressive, right? And then the important thing for Florida here, right, is, like, similar to Texas Tech, when they get those offensive rebounds, like, making sure they know where those shooters are, Cryer, Sharp, and Uzan in particular, right? So, kick out opportunities are limited because those threes, especially for, like, a guy like Cryer, as well as he shot it yesterday, like, he's a gamer, right? I mean, if they get an offensive rebound and have the opportunity to kick out to him for a wide open three, like, it feels like every shot he's taking right now is going in. And if it's wide open like that on a kick out, like, you can forget it.
For sure. Yeah. I think that's their best path to offense in this game is getting on the offensive glass. I mean, Florida's a really good perimeter defense as well. So I think they're fifth nationally in 3-point defense. So, and Houston's obviously number one in the country there, but it's going to be a point of emphasis for Todd Golden and the rest of the coaching staff to, kind of get those guys off the 3-point line. Because Houston, once they get inside the arc, it's not like they're not great in there. I mean, they're 290th in 2-point field goal percentage. And obviously that guard group is way more perimeter oriented, and there's not much of an interior presence, just like on first shot offense in general, besides, the Juwan Roberts post-up game, which I actually think could be pretty important here. Florida does have a lot of bodies that they can throw at him. They're not really that efficient of a post-up defense, though. But Roberts is going to get all the chances in the world because Florida refuses to double down. Like you saw that in the game against Auburn, that they just allowed Janai Broome to kind of get whatever he wanted, especially early in the game. They're just going to play that one-on-one, and they had success against him as well. They had success in both games that they played against Janai Broome. He shot 6 of 14 and 8 for 19. So I don't really trust. I wouldn't say I trust Roberts to have more efficiency than that. So if they can, force Roberts to play one-on-one all night, and there's not a ton of efficiency there, and they can kind of stay connected to shooters, I think Florida's set up pretty well first shot defense wise. It's just a matter of them keeping Houston off of the offensive glass and then being able to generate some form of offense in transition. But I mean, the way I view this as I think it ends up being a pretty low scoring game. Houston's going to value getting back on defense, and they're obviously athletic enough to beat Florida down the floor and be able to set their defense. So overall, I mean, if we're going to play in a grinder, obviously you have to trust Houston a little bit more, and that's the biggest key. I think if this game stays under 70 possessions, I think Houston wins it. If Florida can get this thing over 70, get it to 71 possessions, I do think Florida has enough offense. They have enough weapons. They have enough shot makers late in this game to end up winning it. But I'll side with Houston just because they never seem to get sped up. I don't know how many possessions that game played last night. I think that game played 61 possessions last night, and Houston obviously ended up. That's impressive. I mean, they were down 14 in a 61 possession game, and they came all the way back to win it. That's extremely impressive, and they just never get sped up. So I think this game will stay under 70 possessions, and Houston will end up squeaking this one out.
Yeah. I'm really torn on this game because I think it's going to be a great game. As Vegas obviously thinks so too. I mean, 1 point spread. I am also a little bit concerned. Florida defensively has actually seemed to struggle a little bit off ball screens. They've had a lot of this whole tournament really since the UConn game, they've struggled communication on off ball screens. A lot of shooters have ended up pretty open for rather uncontested looks from behind the arc. And you're going to see some of that in this game, I think, with Cryer coming off screens, Sharp, Uzan. They seem like Florida staff last night, even when Florida was defending on the side of their bench, it seemed like their coaches were trying to talk through stuff. And obviously, it's loud in there, but, they screwed up a few times, and it left, Kelly or Denver Jones open for threes in front of their bench. So that's an area they need to shore up against this because those are paths to offense for Houston. But then also for Houston, they need Uzan to be better here. He struggled last night a little bit. He was in foul trouble, so hard to get in a rhythm that way. But he was 3 for 10. They need him to be really good in this game because I don't really think they want to have to rely on Malik Wilson to generate a bunch of offense for them.
Yeah, and Uzan definitely needs to be better because I think the only reason they were able to make that comeback last night was because LJ Cryer was so good in the first half and early in the second half. I think I texted you during the game. I was like, if LJ Cryer is not making all of these tough shots, Houston would be down 25 right now because they weren't able to generate any form of offense throughout, the first 25 to 30 minutes of this game. And they weren't able to make that comeback without LJ Cryer. So they're going to need somebody else to step up here, whether it's Sharp, getting in the lane, drawing fouls, and then, obviously his perimeter shot making is huge. And then Uzan needs to be great in pick and roll. They're going to try to use it a bunch. It's going to depend on how Florida defends it. Are they going to try to take away those pick and roll actions, or are they going to play some drop coverage? Because Golden will switch up his coverages depending on what his team needs. I think they will start playing a little bit of drop and forcing Uzan to go to his floater game or just his mid-range shot creation game. And if he gets hot a little bit, Florida obviously has options to take that away. So overall, Florida doesn't grade out super well defending the pick and roll. I think they're in the like 60th percentile defending pick and roll ball handlers. Yeah, 71st actually. So not terrible, but not like elite by any means. And Houston, they kind of spam pick and roll actions when they can't get the ball to shooters. They're in the 97th percentile in pick and roll ball handler frequency. So that's definitely going to be a key, especially early in this game. If Houston's not able to generate a ton of efficiency in the pick and roll game, I think Florida is pretty well set up to, get stops and be able to run and transition a little bit more than Houston would like. But if they're able to force Florida to at least hedge that ball screen and, get the ball to the roll man and obviously get the ball to the weak side shooters, I think Houston's going to actually have more avenues to score. And then obviously the offensive glass is big for them as well.
Yeah. I think the first 4 to 8 minutes of this game are going to kind of tell the story. I mean, last night in the Duke game, I was really excited for the game because I was looking at, I think this first, I was just curious what style was going to win out, right? Which style was going to set the tone first. And it was Houston's style really that set it first. It was choppy. It was pretty ugly to start for, the first 4 to 8 minutes. Obviously, Duke then started having some success, but I'm just as excited for this one to see which style wins out. Will it be slow paced and physical and mucked up, or will it be Florida getting out in transition? So personally, I think this game just goes down to the final minute. I think it's going to be either Cryer or Clayton that hits a big shot in the final minute to put their team over the top. I don't feel confident enough in either side really to make a pick. I know that's kind of soft, but I think it's just going to be a great game. That's what I'm rooting for. That's what everyone should be rooting for. And one of those two guys hits some heroic shot that puts them as the end of the One Shining Moment video for the rest of the time.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, something to look out. I mean, the in-game adjustments in this game, I think, are going to be pretty frequent. It's going to depend on, obviously, I just talked about Houston, and like it's going to depend on the pick and roll coverage or how efficient Houston is in the pick and roll game, and then for Florida, how efficient can the other options be? They're going to force the ball out of Clayton's hands. That's almost a guarantee. They're going to force it out of his hands early and often. It's going to be up to Elijah Martin, up to Will Richard, and how they can generate efficiency early in this game and kind of force Sampson to switch some things up defensively. So I do think it's going to be a chess match in this game. And obviously Golden's a fantastic coach, but when we're playing a game of chess, I mean, I'm going to trust, for my money, probably the best coach in the country in Kelvin Sampson. So I will back Houston. Obviously, I don't feel strong about it. And ultimately, it probably will come down to the final minutes because I don't really see either team getting blown out here. Like Houston looked like they were going to end up getting blown out, and it just didn't happen. They're just so good defensively. They're so good late in games. They're so good situationally that, they're the top 3 team in the country because of that and because of Kelvin Sampson and because of their defense. So I don't see either team getting blown out. And I see this, like you said, coming down to one of the final shots between two of the best shot makers in the country in Walter Clayton and LJ Cryer.
Yeah, no, I agree. So exciting. Should be a great national championship game tomorrow night. Look for this, as we said, to come down to the final minutes. And either Houston or Florida coming out on top for the national championship. So enjoy the game. We'll talk to you next time.